I'm Rose Stanley, and this is World at Work TV. I'm joined today by Ravin Jesuthasan from Willis Towers Watson, and we're going to be talking about the future of work. So tell us a little bit about the evolution of work and provide us with some context of the changes that we're seeing right now.
Over the last sort of 100 years or so, we've seen significant evolution in work, and what's interesting is that many of the structures that we have come to commonly accept as it relates to how work is being done in intact jobs within a company are actually, in the grand scheme of things, a fairly recent phenomenon. It came about in the late 19th century when Henry Ford organized the assembly line. And over the last sort of 100-odd years, we've seen that construct of the job progressively change. We went through a period of outsourcing, what has been often called Nikeification, where Nike was the first organization to really start to separate the supply chain or the value chain. And so the traditional pyramid of organizational pyramid of containing all of the functions started to progressively get fray at the edges, if you will. So certain jobs were moved outside of the organization. In the 21st century, what we're seeing is what has been often called Uberization. Essentially, the ability of technology to fragment jobs and pull them apart and challenge one of the core premises of the organization, which is the most efficient way to get work done is in jobs within a company, because you've eliminated the transaction cost. Well, technology has now eliminated that transaction cost, and we're now finding that for many organizations, for many types of work, it is often better to pull those jobs apart and have parts of them done outside of the organization. So a fundamental challenge to kind of the original thesis of the firm, and a challenge to, I think, many of the mindsets that we have developed over the last 100 years or so.
And talk to us a little bit about the framework that you and your co-authors have developed to kind of help companies make some sense of these changes.
Sure. So when John Boudreau, David Creelman, and I wrote Lead the Work, Navigating a World Beyond Employment, what we wanted to do was not just talk about all of the changes that technology and the democratization of work are bringing about, because many of us see those examples and anecdotes every day. We experience Uber. We maybe get some programming work done on a talent platform like topcoder.com or Upwork. What we wanted to do was give business leaders in HR a framework to make decisions. How do I know what work I should be keeping in a job, in an intact job? How do I know what work I should be pulling apart and actually dispersing outside of the boundaries of the organization? And how do I think about it holistically in terms of the work itself, or the assignment as we called it, what that means for the organization? Should the organization be more insular and rigid? Should it be more flexible and interconnected? And ultimately, what does it mean for the rewards? And that's something that is perhaps less obvious to many organizations. They see how the work is changing, they see how it might affect the organization, but what they don't often see is how the rewards are changing and how we're seeing fundamental challenges to our traditional mindset of rewards, which are fairly fixed as it relates to not changing over time, fairly collected, we all get paid and rewarded in the same way, to increasingly organizations being able to highly personalize and customize the rewards for the individual. In a sense, what many have talked about, including many of my colleagues, this notion of treating the employee, or in this case the worker, whether it's the employee or not, more as a consumer with a higher degree of personalization.
You were talking about how the organization is going to have to look at this work and how it's going to be changing in the future, and how we might be figuring out what will be done in-house, what might be done outside by someone else. What about some of those individuals that may be specifically out there looking to work in a way that doesn't connect them as a full-time employee to an organization? This we're hearing a lot also in terms of this is the future workforce, that they are these Uber folks that want to work in a different way. How are organizations taking those types of individuals into consideration also when they're looking at the model that you're discussing?
Absolutely. I think the most significant change that we're seeing is this shift from a singularity of focus that work will be done by employees to a plurality of means for getting work done. And that's the reason we call the book lead the work. So much of leadership has traditionally been about managing intact organizations and employees, to now, how do we equip business leaders to really understand the work itself, what that means for the organization, and the rewards. Certainly we're seeing there, with technology being what it is, and with the dramatic rise of these talent platforms like an Upwork, Topcoder, TaskRabbit, Uber, the list goes on, and they multiply literally by the day. More and more talent realizing that I can actually construct kind of the perfect deal, whether it's my compensation, whether it's my the hours I work, whether it's where I work, how I work, who I work with, in a far more flexible way. And you're seeing that for the talent that is most in demand, and for the last couple of years, that's been not exclusively, but technology talent, because they're in such short supply. They've really been able to craft the deal that they're looking for. I think organizations are going to have to catch up very quickly with how these platforms and how technology is enabling talent to essentially structure the work they want. And very often that is sort of organization agnostic.
So what do you feel practitioners need to do in order to prepare themselves for this?
I personally think, ever the optimist, I personally think this is we're at the advent of the golden age of HR. And the reason I say that is, as we move to this plurality of focus on how work is being done, I think HR is uniquely suited and has this opportunity ahead of it to essentially be that trusted advisor to business leaders on how do I think through the work, the organization, and rewards, and help business leaders navigate these plurality of means for getting work done. So how do I understand three things? How do I understand the structure of work given the need for speed to capability, the cost, and the risk of potentially making a decision that can't be reversed, and essentially the risk of obsolescence. I think HR is ideally suited to help business leaders navigate whether it's deciding whether it's to hire someone, whether it's deciding on an outsourcing arrangement, whether it's deciding to work with a talent platform to fragment jobs and have part of it done on that platform, whether it's to hire an independent contractor or perhaps set up an alliance or joint venture. How does HR help the business leader sort of navigate all of those choices with those three considerations of speed, cost, and risk, and continuously traverse all of those opportunities over time? So I think it's HR's opportunity to seize, and I guess potentially to lose as well, given that what is increasingly going to be less dominant is full-time employees as the primary means for getting work done in HR's traditional stewardship of that particular channel.
So will that be what you just mentioned, what will happen if we don't pay attention to this?
I think that's exactly right. Right now, if you think of how work is done, so you've got HR who's responsible, largely speaking, for the FTE. You've got procurement that often gets involved with the independent contractors and vendors. You might have business leaders who make decisions about joint ventures and alliances, perhaps in collaboration with strategy. And I think as we move towards this much greater flexibility in how work moves across those three and other platforms, there is going to be real demand for someone to provide the oversight, the stewardship, the frameworks for making decisions. If HR doesn't grab the opportunity, one of the others, strategy or procurement, may well view it as within their purview. But I personally think HR is uniquely suited to provide that perspective, because HR is not only focused on cost, but very acutely aware of both the risk and the capability requirements, which is not something that can be said for some of the other functions who maybe are a little bit more focused in either cost or strategy. So I think HR has the attributes and the opportunity to be that trusted advisor going forward.
Very good, Ravin. Any final thoughts for this inevitable change that we see coming?
I do hope that this book and what we were looking to accomplish with the book of sort of enabling HR to raise its game, enabling business leaders to see that many of the changes are not just interesting anecdotes, but markers of a very real shift. And it's not an incremental shift, it's a step change in how work is going to be done. So I do hope that the call to action that we were sort of seeking to generate is in fact sort of embraced by those who read the book.
Thanks, Ravin, so much.
Thank you,
For
Rose.
World at Work TV, I'm Rose Stanley.